Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this fellows session today. This is the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Leadership Institute Fellows Policy Briefing. Thank you so much. Remember to mute yourself so there's not any interruptions, and we'll go ahead and get right into it. My name is Dr. Danielle King, and I'm a 2020-2022 Health Policy Fellow. My academic background is a bachelor's, a master in public health, and a doctorate in law and policy. My expertise is gun violence, health policy, criminal justice reform, and my congressional placement over these 2 years has been with the United States Representative Terry Sewell of the 7th District. I've had the honor to be able to work on the Committee of Ways and Means, particularly the Health Subcommittee, in which we focused on gun violence, voting rights, health equity, broadband deployment, climate change, HIV/AIDS, Medicare and Medicaid, abortion rights, education, etc., in order to be able to invest in the robust public health infrastructure needed in America. And I do want to say thank you so much because my fellowship, which has presented me with full exploration over these 2 years of law and policy and being able to practice that, is presented by Johnson & Johnson. So again, thank you. So unfortunately, I've had a personal background in this particular topic. As you can see here, this is my brother, Sheldon King. His last words were, "You fucking shot me." Those were the dying words of Sheldon King, 33, a Black man who bled out on a kitchen floor in a nondescript brick home in central Colorado Springs. And this is actually from a very nice volume on his life from Zubek 2019. She was an investigative journalist in which I worked to amplify his story. And that encouraged me to get my doctorate in law and policy and to focus on racial disparities and gun-related domestic violence. As we already know, gun violence is a public health epidemic. But it is more importantly where we need to focus on, it is a public health epidemic in Black America, to where there are disproportionate rates of gun violence affecting Black Americans. They make up 50% of gun violence rates, and you're going to be able to see some of those statistics presented today. As evidenced in 2019 by the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence, having a possession of a firearm when there is clear and present history of domestic violence results in a fatal event. So today, what I am presenting is that the Senate should support passage of the 2021 Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act to reduce gun-related domestic violence among Black women. There is strong and clear evidence of gun-related domestic violence among Black women, to which I will be able to demonstrate here. There's an estimation of 4.5 million women in the US that have been threatened by intimate partner with a firearm, and 1 million have experienced gun-related injuries that have been shot by their perpetrator. Now, where these numbers are quite unfortunate, in which I have presented at the very beginning of this presentation that 50% of those numbers of disproportionate rates of gun violence reside in Black America. Again, here we get to see that 51.3% of Black women compared to their white counterparts are significantly impacted. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, 45% of Black women report domestic violence. And even further, the United States Census Bureau projected that by 2050, 50% of domestic violence rates will victimize underserved populations. So what exactly can we do in order to figure out preemptive measures to reduce these numbers, to mitigate gun violence in Black America, especially among Black women? There are removal of firearms before they are used, and they're called protection orders. Protection orders, POs, or extreme risk protection orders, ERPOs, are orders issued by a court for removal of firearms from a person. Currently, these are state laws, red flag laws. Depending on the law enforcement officers or a family member may seek an order. And so with an ERPO, there's a broad provision to where family members, law enforcement, neighbors, familial contacts can be able to enact these ERPOs compared to risk protection orders, which are restrictive and only law enforcement are able to enact those. Orders can be temporary or permanent, and the petitioner must prove that the person is at risk for hurting themselves or others through this civil procedure process. Many states have enacted this in order to prevent mass shootings, particularly Connecticut enacted their first red flag law in 1999 when there was a major atrocity that happened in the state, and they continue to enact it. They are removing guns from domestic abusers, which we understand is a viable strategy, and this was presented by the RAND Corporation in 2020. And domestic violence advocates agree that ERPOs can be enacted to remove these firearms that could end in a murder and suicide. And we've been able to see, especially in America over these last 3 years, that when it comes to mass shootings, there's usually a correlation between the mass shooter having clear and present history of domestic violence. We also understand that states offer a patchwork of these laws. 38% of the states, 19 in the District of Columbia, have red flag laws. San Diego, particularly, removed more than 1,000 guns from at least 550 people over these past 4 years. But when it comes to domestic violence advocates, they have posited that domestic violence protection orders, DVPOs, which allow for immediate extraction of these firearms, also known as ex parte or temporary orders, that the gun violence restraining orders, they're designed to reduce GRDV, but this is across America. The states are able to do this, and there's a particular alignment that allows for extraction of firearms. But it is not within all states. As you can see, only 19 in the District of Columbia have enacted these. And so it is really important for us to understand when it comes to Black Americans, the policy recommendations to inform policymakers, especially where HR 2377 is residing right now. It's with the Senate, is that these victims of domestic violence, especially Black women, they need protection of ERPOs regardless of where they live. It needs to be ubiquitous across the board. And Congress must pass this Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2021, which will allow these ERPOs to be sought by a victim or law enforcement officers in federal court, regardless of the state law. So what exactly are the key provisions of HR 2377? They are pretty much outlined here, which we have talked about throughout this presentation, that law enforcement officers and family household members may file a petition requesting that a federal court could issue an ERPO prohibiting an individual from purchasing or possessing firearms. A federal court may then issue a short-term ex parte ERPO lasting no longer than 14 days. And that's critical because usually at that point, if there are possession of firearms, that 14 days, it could mean that the potential domestic violence victim is still in harm's way. The petitioner may show probable cause to believe that the person possesses or poses a risk of imminent injury to herself, to himself, or to others, and that an ERPO is necessary to eliminate that danger. Following a hearing in which the respondent firearm owner is represented by counsel because of the civil procedure, a federal court may issue a long-term ERPO, which can last up to 180 days. And upon finding out if there is clear and convincing evidence that the respondent poses a danger to herself, himself, or others, that an ERPO is necessary to eliminate that danger, extract all possession of firearms. And that also means bullets or anything like that that could further that danger. So this actually concludes the presentation today. I would like to open it up to any questions and answers, a full discussion to understand how we can actually be able to enact this, possibly advocate for this on the federal level to encourage the Senate to push this in order to save more Black lives, to allow those children to grow up with their mothers and to grow up themselves. Here is my information at the bottom here. If you would like to take that down, I would be willing to discuss this even further. And we need to remember to keep lifting up and leading forward. And thank you so much, everybody. That concludes my presentation. Any questions or comments or anything, you can go ahead and take yourself off the screen. I think I have something in a chat possibly. Even if you would like to ask me about my brother or the work that I've done in the office, that's also allowed.
Dr. King, just one question.
Yes.
I was going to say, well, thank you for your presentation. And then also, how have you met or organized with or been introduced to additional advocacy groups or individuals on the Hill and throughout your experience who may have experienced similar things as you, specifically with your brother?
Yes, thank you so much, Kyle, for your question. And also it being salient to the topic. I've met with a lot of stakeholders that have worked on this issue and that have tried to figure out exactly what can be done in order to mitigate gun violence in Black America. Particularly Representative McBath, worked with Representative Kelly's office, Horsford's office, to be able to advance common sense gun control, to be able to address all of the concerns and the deaths that we are experiencing at disproportionate rates, and how it's also happening exponentially among Black Americans. We've tried to figure out if we can develop somewhat like an omnibus, that we've been able to do with the momnibus for all of the gun legislation to kind of come together to, encourage the Senate to pass these. Over from 2019 to 2020, there have been a lot of bills, particularly over 100 bills when it comes to gun legislation that have stagnated in the Senate. And, that was definitely under a very different administration. Now we have, when it comes to the Biden-Harris administration and them putting forth their gun control measures in order to mitigate gun violence in America, but particularly in Black America, it seems as though that we may be moving in the right direction, but I know that we can definitely move in the right direction with a bit more momentum. And the policy window is right open for us to do that. There are several documented mass shootings. There was a mass shooting that actually happened in my home state in Kansas just earlier this week, and he was brought up to, he's convicted. And so, even though this has definitely happened in my family, we have come together to figure out how we can provide legacy to Sheldon, even though we weren't able to get the justice that he needed, especially being in a domestic violence situation. But it definitely opens up, it allows for more provisions, because we understand that, sorry about that, when it comes to gun violence, it's not just targeting some people. I'm going to mute myself. I'm sorry. My dog's very vocal. Okay. Thank you so much, Kyle, for your question.
There's another question in the chat. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So no, so the stand your ground law, particularly in Florida and in Texas, no, it wouldn't be a hindrance to that. It would only be if someone felt as though that there would be any harmful events that can come out of that. If you're standing your ground, to be honest with you, Seth, I have a Washington Post article out because not only was my brother murdered, but in 2020, a meth addict broke into our home and he tried to kill us. And I live in Kentucky, and in Kentucky, it's also about standing your ground to make sure that you're protecting yourself for harm, and that you have the right to do so, especially because it is your constitutional Second Amendment right. I think we have 2 minutes, so I'll try to be quick with this. But no, it would only be a red flag if there was someone who thought that you were, or who you are potentially thinking of, that would harm themselves or they would harm others. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Seth. Well, it looks like we have about like 56 more minutes. If you want to take yourself off of mute, ask me another quick question or a comment or anything like that, please feel free to do so. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I do want to go ahead and inform everyone to make sure that you stay with us by clicking on leaving the breakout room, not leaving the meeting. If you leave the meeting, then you will not be able to get back in, because it means that you're kind of shutting down the program. So thank you so much. And once again, thank you, Johnson & Johnson, for presenting this really great exploration and once in a lifetime opportunity.